The bells of St. Peter's had not yet finished echoing across Rome when a whisper spread through the marble corridors of the Vatican. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle had spoken. For days, silence hung heavy, rumors swirling like smoke in the Sistine Chapel. The faithful waiting, the cardinals restless, the entire church holding its breath. And then, suddenly, his words broke through like thunder. He did not speak of politics, nor of power, but of the soul of the church itself. He remembered the conclave of May 2025, when Robert Francis Prevost was chosen, becoming Pope Leo XIV. The Augustinian shepherd who had carried the fire of Peru, the humility of a missionary, the patience of a man who listens before he commands. Tagle called him a missionary shepherd, one who reflects, one who gives space for others to breathe, one who builds bridges when others build walls. But Tagle's silence until now had left many uneasy. Some wondered if division was lurking beneath the crimson robes of the college. And when he finally spoke, the reaction was immediate, electric. Cardinals rose from their chairs. Bishops leaned forward. Even those who had doubted, those who whispered that Leo XIII was too gentle, too cautious, felt the ground shift beneath their feet. Because in his voice, there was no hesitation. He spoke of prayer in the conclave, of a unity so swift, so undeniable, it could only have been the breath of the Holy Spirit. He spoke of a church not retreating, but moving forward, continuing the precious legacy of Pope Francis, embracing reform, interfaith dialogue, inclusion, and yet also daring to face tradition head-on. The announcement of an October Latin Mass in St. Peter's, with Cardinal Burke at the altar, was no accident, Tagle said. It was a sign. A sign that the church was not afraid to stretch wide her arms, to embrace her children from every side, from progressives to traditionalists, and then the room shook, because Tagle revealed what few had dared whisper aloud. Pope Leo XIII was considering something unthinkable for centuries of papal life, sharing his Vatican residence with friars. Italian, Filipino, Nigerian, living not as a monarch behind locked doors, but as a brother in community. Some called it madness, others a return to Christ himself, who dwelt not in palaces, but in the company of fishermen and the poor. The cardinals reacted as one would to lightning in the dark. Some stood in stunned silence, others wept, others clutched their rosaries tighter, feeling heaven itself had drawn closer. And still Tagle's words poured forth, about October, about prophecy, about a church on the edge of a great turning. "Do not be afraid," he said, his voice trembling with conviction. "What is coming is not division, but purification, not collapse, but resurrection." At that moment, a silence heavier than marble fell, and from the balcony above St. Peter's Square, pilgrims waiting below claimed to see it, clouds shifting, a ray of sunlight piercing straight onto the cross of the basilica, as if heaven itself had sealed his words. The Vatican was never the same again. The Vatican is not just marble and stone. It is a battlefield of spirits, a battlefield of centuries where angels and demons wrestle in silence while the world only sees the white cassock of the Pope upon the balcony. And now, in the year 2025, the struggle has sharpened, the shadows grown longer, the whispers louder. When Pope Leo XIV was elected on May 8th, the world saw only the smile, the Augustinian simplicity, the missionary warmth of a man who had carried the gospel to distant Peru. But inside the conclave, inside those walls sealed by oath and prayer, the cardinals felt something else, a weight, a fire, a presence that could not be ignored. Cardinal Tagle himself confessed that the unity came faster than any man expected, as if a hand not of flesh but of heaven pressed them into one mind, one soul, one decision. And yet, silence followed. For months, Tagle had spoken little, watching, waiting, praying, while rumors swirled in Rome like storm clouds over the Tiber. Some whispered that factions were forming again, the reformers clashing with the traditionalists, the diplomats battling the prophets. And yet the pro-prefect of evangelization, the man known as the Asian Francis, remained silent, until now. And when he finally spoke, his words did not merely echo through the corridors of the Vatican, they reverberated across the Catholic world. Tagle told the truth. The conclave had not been politics, it had been Pentecost. The choice of Leo XIV was not compromise, but command. He was elected not to preserve power, but to prepare the bride of Christ for what is coming. He described Pope Leo as a missionary shepherd, but then his voice shook as he said the words that sent a chill through the college. He has been chosen not only to lead, but to suffer. The reaction was immediate. Cardinals shifted in their seats, bishops scribbled notes, some wept silently. Because in that moment, the prophecy long whispered in hushed tones resurfaced, the warning that before the purification of the church, a pope would walk the road of the Lamb. Not into glory, but into Gethsemane. And then Tagle revealed something even stranger. That Pope Leo was considering abandoning the traditional papal apartment, choosing instead to live with friars from Italy, the Philippines, Nigeria. A pope, no longer set apart in palace, but eating at the same table, sleeping under the same roof, praying side by side with brothers. To some this was humility. To others it was scandal. For centuries, monarchs and popes have been cloaked in distance, but Leo dared to draw near. Some cried out that this would strip the papacy of majesty. Others whispered that it would restore its holiness. But in that moment, one thing became clear. The papacy itself was being shaken, redefined, purified. Then came the firebrand, the October decree. Permission for a traditional Latin Mass at the very heart of Christendom, St. Peter's Basilica itself. Cardinal Burke, once cast aside, now called again to the altar. To some, this was an olive branch. To others, it was a lightning bolt. Was Leo opening the door to reconciliation? Or was he unlocking a floodgate that could not be closed? Tagle's voice thundered with conviction. This is not compromise. This is prophecy. The church must open wide its arms, or it will break from within. And the reaction was chaos cloaked in silence. Some cardinals embraced him, seeing hope. Others recoiled, whispering that the church stood on the edge of betrayal. Behind those ancient walls, factions stirred like armies in the night, traditionalists sharpening their swords of liturgy, progressives raising banners of reform, and above them all, the Pope. Praying, deciding, preparing for October. For in October, something more than liturgy is expected. Some say he will announce reforms greater than Francis dared, decentralization, lay authority, prophetic voices rising from Africa, Asia, Latin America. Others say he will bow to tradition, unrolling the old scrolls, unlocking the forgotten rites, reconciling with those cast out. But all agree on one thing. October 2025 will be a turning point. And in the silence after Tagle's speech, something strange happened. Witnesses swear the light shifted in the apostolic palace. A beam of sunlight fell not on the floor, but on a crucifix hanging above the gathering. Some said it was coincidence. Others whispered it was a sign, because the church today is no ordinary institution. It is the bride of Christ, bruised by scandal, pierced by division, torn by worldliness, and yet destined for purification. And Tagle's words cut through every doubt. The purification has begun. The factions are not enemies. They are instruments. The fire will burn, but what remains will be pure. The Vatican has been shaken before, but never like this. Secret factions, spiritual battles, prophecy alive within the walls, and yet, beyond the shadows, a voice calls, prepare the way. The church is being stripped, not destroyed, purified, not abandoned, tested, not forsaken. The bride of Christ stands trembling before her bridegroom. The question now is whether she will be found faithful when the fire falls. Cardinal Tagle's words had barely finished echoing through the marble halls when the air itself seemed to shift. Rome trembled with whispers. Pilgrims outside sensed something was stirring, and in the hidden chambers of the Vatican, old secrets began to stir like lions in a cage. The church, the bride of Christ, is entering a season unlike any before. Centuries of glory, centuries of scandal, centuries of triumph and betrayal, all converging now, all boiling to the surface in 2025. And the voice of Tagle was not merely commentary. It was a trumpet blast, a call to arms, a prophetic strike deep into the soul of the Catholic world. He spoke of the conclave, but more than the conclave, he spoke of the mystery behind it. That in those days of prayer, the cardinals were not merely voting, they were wrestling with angels. He said unity came not from diplomacy, but from something higher. A spirit that pressed upon them, an unseen hand that forced their hearts to converge on one man, Robert Francis Prevost. Now Leo XIII. But in the very same breath, Tagle's eyes grew heavy. This pope, he said, is not chosen for comfort, but for the cross. Those words fell like thunderbolts. For within the College of Cardinals there are men who know, prophecies, visions, warnings whispered for decades, that the Church must undergo a passion before her resurrection. And now, October looms. October 25th, St. Peter's Basilica will open its doors to a sight unseen for years. The ancient Latin Mass, led by Cardinal Burke, a man long at odds with Rome, now suddenly summoned back into the center. To some, this was reconciliation. To others, it was the beginning of war, because behind the curtains, factions move. Yes, factions. The Church is not merely holy, it is human, and where there are men, there is ambition, pride, jealousy. Some cardinals plot for reform, dreaming of a church where lay voices rise, where decentralization spreads power across continents. Others scheme for restoration, longing to roll back the clock, to clothe the bride in ancient garments, to silence the noise of modernity. And in between them, Pope Leo XIII stands, torn, tested, chosen for this very crucible. But Tagle's words cut deeper than politics. He revealed whispers of the Pope's personal choice, his shocking desire to abandon the apostolic palace and live not as a king, but as a friar among friars. To eat with them, to pray with them, to suffer with them, Italian, Filipino, Nigerian brothers, sharing bread with the vicar of Christ. To the world, humility. To the factions, heresy. To heaven, perhaps obedience. And the question rises, is this the sign of purification? Is the papacy being stripped down, humbled, prepared for fire? Already strange things have been reported. In the archives, old letters said to be from mystics have resurfaced, warning that a pope would come clothed in simplicity, yet destined for trial. In the corridors, guards whisper of strange lights at night, of voices echoing where none should be. Some say it is imagination, others fear it is the sign of a great clash drawing near, because the Vatican is no ordinary palace, it is the battlefield of heaven and hell. Within those walls, angels keep watch, demons plot, and men choose sides, often unaware of the powers guiding their hands. And now, with the October gathering approaching, all eyes turn to the Pope who dares to change everything. And the Cardinal who has broken his silence to defend him, but listen carefully, because Tagle did not end with comfort. He ended with warning. He said, the bride must be purified. The Church cannot enter glory clothed in stains. What is coming will not be easy. It will be fire. It will be division. It will be suffering. But through it, the bride will shine. And in that moment, the silence in the room was terrifying, for even the boldest cardinals knew what he was invoking, the great prophecies, Fatima's unspoken warnings, the visions of saints who saw blood in the streets of Rome, a pope fleeing through corpses, the cross raised high against the fury of the world. The Vatican is bracing. The faithful are trembling, and yet the Spirit is moving, because what is happening is not collapse but cleansing, not destruction but destiny. The bride of Christ is being readied for her bridegroom, and so I ask you, are we watching politics, or are we watching prophecy unfold before our very eyes? The silence has been broken. The factions have been revealed. The fire is at the door. The question that remains is not what Tagle will say next, nor even what Leo XIII will decide in October, but whether the Church herself will endure the flames of purification, and whether we, her children, will stand faithful when the smoke clears. Because make no mistake, the purification of the bride has begun. The silence after Tagle's warning was not the silence of peace, but the silence before a storm. Rome itself seemed to tremble. The stones of St. Peter's Basilica have heard many voices, popes, emperors, martyrs, reformers, but this voice carried something different. A weight of destiny, a whisper of prophecy, a cry of the Spirit that cannot be ignored. Because the Catholic Church today stands on the edge of two worlds, the fading twilight of what has been and the fiery dawn of what must come, and the bridge between them is the papacy itself. Pope Leo XIV, chosen not for glory but for suffering, not for triumph but for trial. The cardinals know it, the faithful sense it. The enemies of the Church mock it, but heaven has decreed it. Inside the Vatican, the factions stir like ancient armies preparing for battle. On one side, the reformers. They wear the smile of progress, but their hearts burn with urgency. They dream of councils where laymen and women rise to power, where the church decentralizes, where the voice of every continent shakes Rome itself. They say this is the spirit of Vatican II, but others whisper it is the spirit of rebellion, the seed of fracture. On the other side, the traditionalists. They clutch their rosaries and lift their eyes to the Latin Mass, to incense and chant, to the glory of Christendom past. They believe the bride has been stained by modernity, and only by returning to the ancient ways can she be made pure again. They call themselves defenders of tradition. But their critics call them stubborn, divisive, unwilling to move forward, and between them stands Pope Leo XIV, with Cardinal Tagle at his side, a shepherd caught in the middle of a battlefield, holding the staff of Peter in one hand, and the cross of Christ in the other. But listen, because the battlefield is not flesh and blood. It is spiritual. It is cosmic. It is angels against demons, prophecy against pride, heaven's fire against the schemes of hell. For centuries, mystics have warned that the Vatican itself would one day be shaken from within, that enemies would rise not only outside but inside the walls. And now, those warnings seem less like distant dreams and more like today's headlines. The October decree, the Latin Mass at St. Peter's, is no small gesture. It is a flash of lightning across a dark sky. It signals something bigger, something deeper, that the Pope is opening doors that many thought closed forever. And with every door opened, the factions press harder. Some rejoice, others recoil. The Church trembles, and then there are the rumors. The Pope's desire to abandon palace life, to share his home with friars, to live in simplicity. For centuries, popes have been monarchs. Even the humblest of them slept under gilded ceilings, guarded by Swiss halberds. But Leo XIII dares to be different. To eat bread with brothers, to wash dishes, to sleep on a simple bed, to live not as a king but as a witness. Some call this madness, others call it holiness. But everyone knows it is a sign, because the bride of Christ is being stripped. Her jewels are being removed. Her crown is being tested. Her garments are being burned away, so that only what is pure, only what is holy, only what is faithful remains. And in the middle of this comes Cardinal Tagle's thunder. His words were not mere opinion, they were prophecy. The church must be purified, he declared. The bride must pass through fire. And when he said it, some swore they felt the temperature shift in the room, as if the Holy Spirit itself descended upon marble and stone, sealing the truth. But the purification of the bride has never been gentle. It comes through division. It comes through scandal. It comes through betrayal and martyrdom. Christ himself was betrayed by one of his own. Why should his church be spared? And so the factions harden. Some cardinals whisper of plots, of alliances, of secret plans to push the Pope one way or another. Some seek to control him. Others seek to resist him. And still others seek to remove him. For make no mistake, the papacy is not only a throne, it is a target. The enemy of souls knows that if Peter can be struck, the flock will scatter. And so the spiritual battle intensifies. But amid this storm, the faithful are called to see beyond the politics, beyond the gossip, beyond the fear, to see the hand of God at work, to see that what looks like collapse may in fact be cleansing, that what looks like chaos may in fact be preparation, that what looks like the end may in fact be the beginning. Because prophecy has long spoken of this hour. Fatima, Akita, the whispers of mystics, the visions of saints, all warning of a great trial for the church, a time when confusion would reign, when even the elect would be tempted to despair, when the smoke of Satan would enter the sanctuary. And yet, the promise remains, the gates of hell shall not prevail. Now the bride trembles at the altar. The factions clash behind closed doors. The Pope prays with friars. The cardinals plot in whispers. The faithful cry out in fear and hope. And heaven watches. The silence has been broken. The fire has been lit. The bride of Christ is entering her passion. The only question left is this. When the purification is complete, when the fire has burned away every stain, when the bride stands before her bridegroom at last, will we be found faithful? And so the Vatican waits. Factions sharpening, shadows whispering, the bride trembling at the edge of fire. Cardinal Tagle's voice has cracked the silence, and Pope Leo XIV now walks a road few dare imagine. October is no longer just a month. It is a prophecy. But here is the twist no one saw coming, because while the world stares at the battle inside Rome, The true sign will not appear in the halls of the Vatican, nor in the chancel of St. Peter's Basilica, but in the skies above Jerusalem. For when the Pope bows in humility, when the bride is stripped and purified, a cross of light will blaze where Christ first carried his own, not the end, but the beginning. Not collapse, but coronation. The bride of Christ, purified at last.